Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we're coming to the second Christmas episode of the show. And like the previous one, it is family focused, involving Ray, obviously, as the central character of the show. But instead of focusing on his relationship with his father, now it's an episode focusing on his relationship with Debra. And in this one, it is about their intimate life, which, given that is one of Ray's focuses, as the pilot and several other episodes since then have made abundantly clear to the audience. This one is a subject I'm actually surprised they haven't tackled in specifics. There's been little hints, like in the pilot. The first thing that Ray's like, I think I'm having sex. Just like he's trying to think, am I reading the signals right? Here, they go and direct that. Now, with how long Ray and Debra have been together at this point, you think this would have been a topic that would have come up by now, because in 2 seasons' time, it'll be their 10th anniversary as a married couple, and they were together for at least a couple years before that. So at this point, they've been a couple at least a decade. So you would think by this point, Ray would at least have a good idea of what the signs are when they're coming off of his significant other. However, I think what they're going with this is they're playing him off as the typical bumbling husband that we've seen in dozens of sitcoms, dozens of other stories, but with a good heart. And with here, it does make for some admittedly funny joke material. And Ray and Patricia do play off each other well with said material. And the episode is written by Steve Scroman, who writes some of the better episodes of this second season. Children's Book, which I've already covered. The Family Bed, which is another good one. Oh, 6 Feet Under. Ray's midlife crisis. That's going to be a fun one to talk about once we get there. Jeff Mayer is the director. Why Are We Here? Neighbors. And funny enough, this is actually going to be the last episode he directs of the show, so quite a good one to go out on. Title of the episode, All I Want for Christmas. While through a modern lens, you would think it's named off that song that is the bane of retail workers everywhere. Because it's by the end of it, you're like, by the end of December, you're like Tom Atkinson in Halloween 3, you're like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off! But nope, it's actually named after an older song, at least according to IMDb. All I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth. Of course, if you're Ray, you could probably make a dirty version of that. All I want for Christmas is But considering that he's relearned how to play the piano, and he even mentions doing a dirty version of Happy Birthday in a later episode, I could see Ray, you learn how to play this song on the piano and doing a dirty version of it. This strikes me as being in Ray's humor. Now, as I've already given a brief indication of what the plot is, time to get down into specifics. Episode begins with Ray and Debra trying to figure out a time for intimacy. Obviously, they're talking about it in front of the kids, so they have to use a euphemism, which not only protects the kids, but from a writing standpoint, allows the writers to try to be a little bit more creative with the verbiage. This is also going to be something we're going to see in a Season 3 episode involving Halloween and contraceptives. And as they admit on the commentary for that, it's a lot funnier if you don't say the word. So that they use things here. In this episode, the euphemism is appointment. And they actually have to quickly avoid an awkward conversation because Allie asks, what's an appointment? Oh, it's when 2 adults decide to meet. You know, like going to the dentist. And Ray, being the smart aleck that he is, even goes with that, which leads to a good little opening moment joke ender. But the appointment falls apart because Debra gets too tired from Christmas shopping and all that. Ray throws a little bit of a hissy fit, like you would expect someone like him to. Then they get into the big discussion involving signals. It's like, whenever we do this, you always throw it away. Whenever I'm in the mood, you're not. And then she throws it back at him. What about when I'm in the mood? I was in the mood last week and you weren't. And he asks, when was that? And she says, when I asked you to give me a massage, you gave me one of these ones. That half-hearted one. And the line that Ray says in response to this, Ray Romano due to multiple takes. A lot of the times he has to come up with quick one-liners like that, and on the blooper reels they usually would show a lot of them. Like in the later episode I've already mentioned about the family bed, there's a scene at the beginning where he has to react to keep getting hit in the groin, and he has to say a lot of euphemisms for where he got kicked. Now this one, I don't remember offhand if he did a lot of euphemisms for, but I just love the one that they used here. I'm glad they used it. He's like, so you say, give me a back massage, and that means Mr. Smith goes to Washington? It's the way he says it with the vigor. It got a big laugh from the audience, and even now it's one of those ones that still gets a good chuckle from me. A very good line. Of course, you could also have gone with another classic reference. He could have said, that means Mr. Deeds goes to town. Of course, that one probably would have gotten nicked by the censors because of the phrase goes to town being used in that context. Well, the conversation ends, of course, with them not going to town. And the next day, Ray is talking about things with Andy. So when I see Andy there again, of course, Andy strikes out more than Ray does, so as he even points out, I'm not the one to be talking about. So they drag one of the female co-workers that we only going to see once, because it's one of the guest stars, and to get a female's perspective on Ray's dilemma. And of course, said guest star is played by Christine Kavanagh. I'm just trying to make sure I got her name pronounced correctly. Who, if you listen to her voice without knowing her other work history, you're going to be like, why does she sound familiar? Well, because she voiced Chucky in the Rugrats, the title character in Babe, and the title character in Dexter's Lab. So big shot in the 90s nostalgia there. And of course another little interesting connection with my grandmother who got me hooked on this show because she also used to watch the Rugrats with me. Another little bit of my childhood I might tackle probably as a video essay one day down the road. I might do the movies in the format like this. Well, Erin listens to the dilemma and she gives them some good advice. It's very helpful advice. And that is that they don't want the romance crap, as she calls it, to end at the wedding, that they want it to continue. And that makes sense, because if you don't continue the romance, marriage is going to get stale, everything's going to go downhill. You just got to do it in the right amounts. I know a lot of people seem to do it mainly around Valentine's Day, but if you like go slow and then go in spurts, probably not the best. You just got to figure out what works best for your relationship. And I know some people are going to say, what do I know about it? I mean, I've only had like maybe one super serious relationship for a couple years, but that's what we found, was that bits and pieces and all that, always constant communication. Of course, having similar interest also does help, so that was probably what helped in that one, but always making sure the other feels appreciated. And she even uses that phrase here, so tie back into the main plot there. Ray does try to put this advice into practice by getting Debra an early Christmas present. He calls it the magic hands. It's to help with massaging. It does help, but in typical Ray fashion, he screws things up and the magic hands gets entangled in Debra's hair. Nice little thought, but typical Ray fashion, he just had to mess it up. And he doesn't seem to improve, and then Christmas hits. And this is another little funny moment I like, where we get to see Ray sing an Elvis song in the ghetto. Which, of course, he throws in that falsetto voice of his where he's doing it. First, he's doing a mock low voice. On a cold and gray Chicago morn. Like that. Not as low as how Robert sounds, but you can tell he's impersonating Elvis. But every now and then, he'll throw in a high. In the ghetto! That joke little high note that Ray usually does. And because of him doing all that, cleaning, also being in his boxers, it puts Debra in the mood inadvertently, and then leads to another funny moment where Ray's like, really now? You've activated the launch sequence. And then the parents and Robert walk in, and he has to quickly cover up his boxers using a reef, which leads to probably my favorite Robert line of the entire episode. Kind of deadpan, but mostly his dry inflection, just in the way he's looking at Ray, is what makes this line. Nice. We usually hang ours on the door. Oh, that's very funny. And of course, the parents, in typical fashion, they ruin Christmas in a small way. And that is by ruining the tree, along with Robert. Robert ruins the tree, I think, a little bit more because he breaks the top. Accidentally, but he does. It's connecting to the whole thing about him not knowing his own strength, which And I can kind of tell you I kind of relate to that, having to make sure I don't break anything. And which leads to another great line from Ray. You just hate anything taller than you, don't you? Now, when they're actually opening their presents, it's a nice little moment. There is some comedies thrown throughout, like what Marie gets Debra. She gets her one of those old little, for lack of a better phrase, is like a granny jumper. When look, it's coming from a grandmother in there, so something that you would expect someone like Marie to wear, but for Debra, it's like she would never wear this. So this just seems like an insult of a gift, even though the way that Doris Roberts is playing it off, it seems like she actually is sincerely gifting it to Debra, thinking she will like it. But we can all tell from reading the undercurrent of Patricia's performance that Debra doesn't like this. And that is encapsulated in the moment when Frank goes to take a photo, and she just, in the way that she holds it up when she's getting the photo taken. Robert gets Ray a great gift, though. He gets him a model airplane, supposed to be the one that Chuck Yeager flew. And then Ray, what's he get him? Golf balls. Nice little disparity there in their relationship. I think Ray feels a little guilty afterwards, so he lets Robert fly it, which of course ends up with a broken window, which is but of a joke later. I'm not going to really spoil all of it. Of course, because of earlier, Ray thinks, maybe we should try to get everyone out of the house. Frank blows the whistle after realizing what it is, and you can imagine Marie's reaction. She gets upset in typical Marie fashion, even though, as Frank points out, part of the reason she gets upset is probably because of a past deed of hers, so the whole do as I say, not as I do approach, which is going to come up in another episode. Let me just check to see. I know it's not on this disc. I believe it's on the next disc. Oh yeah, we're actually... We're 7 episodes away from that, so that should be an interesting one. And that's going to have a big plot moment, a plot reveal, and then a big discussion going along with it just from a logistics and head-scratching standpoint. That whole blow-up leads to Ray and Debra having a little heart-to-heart up in the bedroom. It looks like it's going to lead to something, and that's when Robert ruins it. And all in all, is a good episode. I'd say this is another one of the early big classics of the show. True classics, not just a great episode or a good episode, but another early classic one. I don't know if I put it in the same level as the previous one, because the letter had that big little impact, and of course that ending with Marie definitely makes things like top. But the ending here is a nice little joke when we see Erin is dating Andy, and of course since she was a one-off guest character, the next time we see Andy, we're going to assume that the relationship went over into the diving board after a little bit. Probably incompatibility for long term, who knows. A part of that is because of something that Ray found out, and that was at least that Debra finds it attractive when he's pathetic as well. Which might go a little bit into why she was attracted to him when he was doing the whole cleaning and singing in the front room, but that might just be a different thing she likes about him. Like him actually doing that to try to help a little bit in his underwear while singing on Christmas. A lot of other things. The pathetic thing probably just because of how it goes with his appearance and all that. Kind of ties back to the who's handsome thing, whereas both Barone boys are attractive in their own way. Robert's classically handsome, whereas Ray is adorable. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that. Outside Christine being in the episode, there's not really a lot of interesting trivia on IMDb, and seeing there's no commentary for this episode, and can't get any from them. And that's going to be a trend for the next couple ones. There's going to be a couple interesting little moments there. And being a history buff, the next episode is always been one that I've always loved watching, one that I never skip. Like this one, I might skip every now and then, but it's usually one I always watch. The next episode, I never skip. And of course, that's going to be episode 13. That's going to be Civil War. And considering the title, it is apt, considering that it's going to involve Ray and his dad at odds yet again.